This video is brought to you by the 3-Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. Kia ora koutou, and welcome to the 3-Minute Board Games Games of the Year for 2023. A video I'm filming in 2024 because I like to think about these things for a little bit once the year is actually ended. Now, there are a few caveats with my awards. The first is the timescale for them. You see, I don't chase a lot of new releases, and games tend to get to our country a little bit later than they do to practically anyone else. What this practically means is there's a lot of games I consider for 2023 that probably came out in 2022. What it also means is there's probably an awful lot of games released in the last 6 months or so that I just haven't seen. And I'm pretty sure the game that's going to win my Game of the Year award won a bunch of people's Games of the Year award last year. But that's okay. Every award show from every channel and every organization is just one person or a group of people's opinions. Awards only have the power you give them. And of course, these awards are 100% my awards. And if you don't like the games I gave awards to, well, that's fine. These are my awards. If you get your own opinions on awards, have your own award show. And look on the bright side, at least our awards don't have any government agencies telling us what games can and can't be included. I'm looking right at you, Hugo Awards. And yes, our awards are completely and utterly above reproach. The only people who get any kind of say of them are me and our patrons. And if you want to support 3-Minute Board Games and all the work we do here, we do that without publisher funding. We're backed completely by YouTube ad revenue and our awesome patrons. If you want to be one of those awesome patrons, sign up. It means the absolute world to us and helps us keep delivering the show. Anyway, on to the awards. Let's start off with the Foundation Game of the Year. Now, a Foundation game is a game that has very simple mechanics, it's short to play, and it's great for teaching people about modern board games without overloading them. A good Foundation game has to be a game that stands alone. That even though it is relatively low complexity and quick to play, it's still a really awesome game. Now, I have 2 honorable mentions for this award, and unbelievably, those 2 games are Art Society and Archaeos Society. I found both of these games to be excellent and towards the light end of the complexity scale. And they're both games that my groups wanted to play again and again. But the winner is a game that has become a stock standard for us. A game that we will quite gladly play if we have 15 or 30 minutes left at the end of a session. And that game is Acropolis. Acropolis is a very fast-paced tile drafting and set collection game. One of the things that stands out in the game for me is its 3-dimensionality. Because stacking things up in the game does get you more points. And there's a lot of thinkiness in just exactly how you position these tiles to get the maximum amount of points in a game. A really solid, fun and fast game that gets more and more competitive the more experienced your players are. Because in an early game, someone might collect all of one color and score a bucket load of points. But as you get more experienced, you start noticing who's going for what. And the scores really tighten up. Really cool game. So that is our Foundation Game of the Year, Acropolis. The next award is one of the unusual ones we give out, and it is the Board Game Innovation Award. Now, I give this to a board game mechanism or idea or something that someone has come up with in the board game space. And this year, I'm giving it to a game I otherwise didn't particularly like, Books of Time. Because I think this book system they use in this game, where you open up the book, you put new pages in it, and you take actions to flick the pages and take the actions on them. And you could reset the book by flicking it back over. There's a real tactile thing about placing down the book, opening it up, putting pages in, and flicking back and forth and doing stuff with it. There's real potential here. The game itself, Books of Time, didn't, I think, capture or best utilize this cool mechanic or this cool idea. It was very abstracted and a little bit sort of waffly. But I think the next game made with this mechanic could be really, really cool. I'm really excited to see what someone takes with this idea of having physical books that you put stuff in and then you manipulate the pages as your actions and then do the stuff that's on the opposite pages. So there's so many combos you can build by having the pages being double-sided and then putting stuff like there so this does that and then you flick that over and it changes things. You put a new page in the middle, clip it closed, and that changes how your effects work. This is a really cool game space that has a lot of potential to be explored. So I'm really keen to see what else happens here. So, my board game innovation, the books from Books of Time. Next up is the Small Box Game Award. And I love the idea of small box games. The limitations on components mean you have to do that little bit extra with game design. Fortunately this year I didn't play that many small box games. It's quite a weird year for that. So I have a very limited field to pick from. So this year I'm going to give the award not to a game that was innovative or great or brilliant, but to a game that was absolutely rock solid. And that is the Star Wars deck building game. This game does very little that is original, that hasn't been covered in other games before. And in fact, it borrows heavily from the Star Wars LCG, as well as Dominion and obviously Star Realms. But it's such a nice, tight package of a game. Everything is just in there. You set it up, you play it, it's just deep enough to be engaging. And I've sat and played like 4 or 5 rounds on the trot with people. And it's been fun. It's been a really good game. And even though it's an IP that's been done to death, the small box game isn't from that smaller box, and it doesn't do anything particularly original. The whole combination of a package just makes it a really fun, engaging game. It shouldn't be. It should be the kind of thing that I go, this is boring dreck, this is dull, it's uninspired, they didn't come up with any fresh ideas, yet I play and I play it. So this truly mediocre game somehow is also really, really good. And that's what makes it my small box game of the year. I don't know why it's so good. I don't know why it works. It just does. Next up, we have the Te Mana o Aotearoa Award for the best board game from Aotearoa, New Zealand. But first of all, an honourable mention to Circadian's Chaos Order. Now, this is a game that I only got last year. I believe it came out a bit earlier than that. I've described Chaos Order as a masterpiece of a game, but the sort of game that you have to play dozens and dozens of times. It's the kind of game that if you went back to the period where people only had 3 or 4 games and they played those games to death, Chaos Order would be an absolute legend. But because the meta these days out there seems to be that people play a game a couple of times and then they quickly move on to other things, you can never develop the sort of rich meta and rich experience and rich group history that is required to make a game like Chaos Order really tick. So it's a game I think is going to fly under a heck of a lot of radars, and it's really clever. It deserves to be talked about in the same breaths as games like Dune. The problem is, Dune came out in 1979 and has had decades of people playing the game over and over to death, and it has that cachet. Chaos Order, I'm afraid, is like a progressive rock concept album that came out way too late after Stadium Rock was dead. Another reason for mentioning Chaos Order is the winner of this prize is actually Scholars of the South Tigris, which is a game that was co-designed by Sam McDonald and Shem Phillips. And Sam designed Chaos Order. I like to bring up that I think Sam is one of the most underrated designers out there, simply because he works alongside Shem Phillips. And on a lot of his games, you'll see Sam and Shem's names beside each other. And the number of times I see in comments that people go, "Oh, Shem, that Architects of the West Kingdom, such a brilliant design. You're a genius to bring that game into life with a single vision by yourself." And I'm like, it's Sam co-designed the game. He was there the whole time. And I feel like he just gets overlooked by a lot of people out there. So while I'm giving this award to Scholars of the South Tigris, which was by both Sam and Shem, I really want to use this moment to call out Sam and say that I think he's a really exciting designer. And I really want to see a lot more of his solo work as well. Because I thought Circadian's First Light was really great, and I thought Chaos Order was brilliant, even if it missed its audience. And I can see his influence, and of course Shem's influence, in Scholars of the South Tigris. A game I think is a real return to form for Garfield Games. Not that they've been putting out bad games or anything, it's just there's been a couple of titles recently that I've been so-so on. Nothing has quite grabbed me as much as Paladins of the West Kingdom did when I first played that. Scholars is the first game since Paladins to really get me excited. And it's the first one I really want to play again and again and again. I've liked some of their other titles, but it's really Scholars, Paladins, and Circadian's First Light that have really wormed into my skin and made me want to play them again and again. Scholars is just a really clever game. I love the whole framing of it, that it's about translating documents and how you go about doing that. That really clicks with me. Because it's not just about converting resources into another form of resource to convert into victory points. You're actually taking something and you're putting it through this process, and through that process of getting this document translated, you're scoring your victory points. And it's that narrative hook that really has grabbed me with Scholars. The best New Zealand game of the year is Scholars of the South Tigris. The next award is the best new game to me, and that's because I don't spend all day on Kickstarter pressing F5 waiting for things to refresh, and I don't get new releases when they come out an awful lot. Even when I get review copies, I tend to take my time getting to them. Quite frequently, I'll get to a game years after it comes out. Now, this one's a slightly sort of squiggly one because this version of the game came out quite recently, but I hadn't played the original, and that is Libertalia. Libertalia, and I've only played the reprint, is a game that just clicks with a lot of my groups because it's fast, it's vicious, there's so much backstabbing, and it's clever. The fact you get a limited number of cards, but everyone gets the same card. So it all starts off from equal positions, and you have to play these cards, and you're sort of double guessing and triple guessing what everyone else is going to do while trying to maximize your points. I really, really like Libertalia. It's a game that will, it only takes half an hour or so to play as well. It is another one of those games that we will just put out on the table any given night, and everyone's like, yeah, I want to play a game of that. I know a lot of people are down on the art on the new version, but I had a look at the old version, and I'm like, really? You're going to die on that hill? Anyway, I'm fine with the art. It's not exactly exciting or anything, but it's clean. I can read what the cards do. The effects all work, and the tokens and stuff all feel nice. The quality of the game itself is fine, but the gameplay is really, really neat, and that's what makes Libertalia the best new game to me. Next up, we have the Patron's Choice Award, an award that is voted on by our Patreon people. They put forward a list of nominations. I select like 20 odd games to go into our first round of votes. Then they're all voted on, and then we end up with 4 or 5 finalists. And this year, there was a clear favourite in both rounds. And that game was Heat Pedal to the Metal. Oh, there's another award that's popped up. That's the Best Solo Gaming Award. So it looks like Heat Pedal to the Metal not only picked up our Patrons Award, it's also picked up our Solo Gaming Award. So yeah, not only picked by our amazing patrons, it's also got a fantastic solo mode where you can really simply play all of the other cards in the competition with just one flip. Well, and there goes another award. Yep, that's the Universal Game of the Year. This is my Game of the Year as well. So it is our Patron's Choice. It is our Solo Game of the Year, and it is our overall Grand Finalist Game of the Year. Heat Pedal to the Metal is awesome. It is so fun. I really, really love this game. If you don't know, I am a massive motorsport fan. But only really Formula One. But I have been a Formula One fan since the 80s, back in the days of Prost and Senna. And I've actually been rewatching old Formula One on F1 TV recently. So going back to the very old races from the 70s and 80s, which is where this is set. So the style of cars in this is very much in that late 60s sort of era with Bruce McLaren and Denny Hulme and Chris Amon being 3 legendary New Zealand drivers. Amon famously being the best driver probably to never win a race. Denny Hulme being the 1967 champion and the only New Zealander to win the Formula One championship. And of course, Bruce McLaren being the name behind McLaren F1, one of the biggest names in motorsport. So not only is it something I am really a big fan about, the topic is something I really legitimately spend way too much time on. I watch every F1 race when I can, usually on delay because of the time differences. At the very least, I watch the highlights if I can't watch the whole race. And this game does one of those things I really like. That's taking deck building and deck building ideas and making you do stuff with them. So instead of just playing cards to buy things like Dominion, which I don't dislike Dominion, but I prefer it when a deck building game lets you do something. And this one lets you drive cars around a track. And it's actually sunk Formula D for me, which has always been like a pretty okay to good game. And I do like Formula D, but Heat is just so much, it's like a much more modern, much more competitive, much more gamery game than Formula D ever was. And I love all of the little subsystems in the game, especially like the photographers when you go past them. And if you're speeding, you can get like an extra upgrade. I like the campaign mode where you can get extra add-ons for your cars. It's just a cool, fun racing game that feels like a racing game. because you've got to take risks. You've got to manage your car. And I also like that when you upgrade your car, each car feels different. So you'll have people who are really good down the straights and you'll have others that are amazing at cornering. And I just love that. I'm really excited to see what they do with this game. They've announced a new expansion and it comes with an orange car, and you bet I'm getting that because of McLaren F1. I'm going to get my little orange car, I'm going to paint them up, and we're going to do a bunch of races because my patrons are right about this game. This game is fantastic, and it is our game of the year. It's our solo game of the year, and it's our patrons game of the year. And that's the end of the video. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and let me know what your games of the year were. And let me know what games I've missed and that should really be on this list next year, because I've still got a whole year to look at games that came out, in 2023 that I can put on this list next year, or at least I can review on the channel next year and consider them for this list. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, like, share, and subscribe to the channel.